Okay, just need to wait for the stream to come up on my end. Okay, there we are. There we are. Yes, behold my Microsoft Paint background. Yeah, well, on Google Images got some official Sonic Frontiers art just to really complete the scene for the review. I decided to do things a little differently this time around. I've based since I have recently completed Sonic Frontiers on hard mode, got 100%, saw everything the game had to offer. I felt that, hey, while it's fresh on my mind, might as well do a review of sorts. And plus, it should be a little easier for me to do a review like this rather than a character comparison for an hour, because I'm just focusing on one singular topic and I'm not bouncing between one character versus another. It's not like the Amaterasu versus Kratos train wreck where basically I ran out of stuff to say 10 minutes in, and because basically there really isn't much of a fight, even though there seems to be so much potential in that sort of thing. Without a visual component to it, it's just more or less, hey, Kratos blocks zombies' attacks, Kratos attacks at range. But anyways, that is not what we're talking about today. Instead, we are talking about Sonic Frontiers, basically, the latest addition to the Sonic franchise. Anyways, in regards to my thoughts on the game, I would have to say that it is arguably one of the best Sonic games I played in quite a while, basically. Because for me, while I never played while I never played Sonic Boom, I have only heard and seen horrible, bad things about it. The best thing to come out of Sonic Boom was the TV show. But still, anyways, but even then, even the better Sonic games, even the other Sonic games that basically came out in the recent decade, basically have been just sort of mixed. I mean, the best one we had was Sonic Generations, but that was basically just more or less piggybacking off of the series pass, where you're going to all the past levels. And while that's good and all, it basically, you want to see something, you want to see new horizons being expanded into. But basically, whenever the Sonic franchise tried to do that, it felt like they were trying. It had potential, but then it would fall short. I mean, just look at Sonic Lost World, for instance, where they were trying to go for a whole Mario Galaxy feel with that game. However, it ended up just feeling a little uncanny. I don't know why, but just unlike Mario Galaxy, where it's like, okay, all these weird planetoids, I can kind of get behind that because Mario's in space and, well, anything's possible in the vast vacuum of space. But in Sonic Lost World, basically, it's in the Sonic world. However, it's just weird floating islands that are just there. They don't explain how they're floating. They're just there. Just these Mario Galaxy planetoids. They're just there. And then as for the Zonies characters, the Zonies felt like, basically, they felt a little bit forced at times, just particularly towards the end when you felt like Zarbok was trying to go for a more black arm sort of thing. We're basically just going for Black Doom with just trying to basically make things go over the top in terms of seriousness. But anyways, Sonic Frontiers, on the other hand, I would have to say that basically it had a very good balance of having basically its somber moments and basically being willing to tackle serious themes such as war, separation, regret, sorrow. But it didn't do so in an over-the-top fashion like you would see out of Shadow the Hedgehog or Sonic Lost World. Basically, it felt organic, much like Sonic Adventure 2, where basically, for the most part, it was your typical Sonic game. You're running fast, you got the upbeat music, just bright environment, but then they would just sucker punch you with those moments. Basically, in regards to areas, I would have to say that my favorite area in Sonic Frontiers would have to be the 4th island in the game, just because I loved the build up there, just between the music and how you would climb up the towers, with each tower having its own unique traits. It just really built up the moment. Heck, when I was first playing through that island on stream, I was originally going to end things off, but once I saw the towers and once I heard the music kicking in, I had to know what was happening next. I basically was invested at that point, because while the game was definitely picking up after the first island, it was really going into overdrive once all 3 Titans were defeated, and all you had to do was lower the dimensions. Though, the only thing, though, that I would have to say is that I felt that the ending was very rushed because just here you had it where you had three epic bosses. They had great music, great looks, good battle arena. You're flying around as Supersonic and you're doing stuff out of Dragon Ball Z. Basically, we're just Sonic's doing these Superman feats of strength. But then you get to Supreme, and with Supreme, it feels like basically Supreme was a little rushed because just for one thing, Supreme felt like it went down much easier than the other three Titans. Just pretty much the only thing that was stopping me from defeating Supreme sooner was the fact that just you have to apparently defeat the hovering units around Supreme. But if those things weren't around, then basically Supreme would have went down. Supreme would have went down insanely quickly because unlike the other Titans, where they're constantly moving or they're constantly trying to counterattack you or they're constantly going on the defense, basically Supreme was just more or less standing there absorbing the hits, and then it all came to a head with the final boss, the end, where basically the end just really left a sour taste in my mouth because with all of the build-up that the game was having, with these cool bosses, just these three bosses, Giganto, Wyvern, and Knight, all three of them felt like they could be final bosses in their own right, where basically just, here we have Giganto, they're just going all out with the power rock with his music, and then just you're going supersonic and you're feeling, oh yeah, I feel the power, alright. Especially since they showcased just how powerful Giganto was against base Sonic, where basically Sonic tried to do some homing attacks on Giganto, and it was essentially like a gnat attacking an elephant. It was pretty much doing nothing. But then you have it where Sonic just dashes through Giganto, pulling off a Kratos from God of War 3, and just destroying Giganto in just one fell move right after the battle. And then just it only got better with Wyvern when you're chasing him around the arena. You're basically dodging all these missiles. I didn't know this at the time, but you can apparently parry the missiles, and frankly, it would have been better if I would have known that just at the time that you just needed to hold down the buttons to do the parry. You didn't have to press anything else. You didn't have to do a release at the right time. It was just hold the buttons down, you automatically do the parry. That would have been so nice to know. Or rather, if the game would have made it clear. Because when I was doing the parries, I thought you actually had to press the A button in order to actually do them properly. But anyway, while letting go of the buttons. Yes, it was relatively weird for me. But then you have Knight, where basically, Knight I would have to say is a little weaker than Wyvern in terms of just the overall battle, where basically Knight isn't as mobile as Wyvern or Giganto. But you had that shield that was bouncing around, and then the fact that Sonic at the end of the fight just goes full Bionis on Knight, just grabbing that giant sword, and then just cleaving Knight in twain, like how Susanoo did to Orochi during the Orochi battle in Okami, and same with Nagi with the full power Orochi, pure form Orochi in that fight. But anyways, as for the end, just first you had that Supreme fight where basically if that was just the first phase of the fight, it was like, okay, that's perfectly fine, it's just the first phase. But then basically, then you get to the end, and the end is just this faceless planet, or faceless moon, just giving me some Majora's Mask moon vibes. Though frankly, if they would have added a creepy face to it, that would have made it all the better, just make us feel like we're fighting a living thing rather than just a rock, basically. The rock that Charlie Brown kept being handed to at Halloween. But though, I could basically put the boss's bland appearance behind. I could get past that if we actually fought the end as Sonic. Instead, they basically just put us in some Toho bullet hell with Sage, where basically just you're blasting all the projectiles of one color with your one color with bullets of the same color, all while the end is just going on this monologue that you can only really understand half of it because they don't give you subtitles, and they wanted to do that whole distortion with the end's voice, where I was able to get bits and pieces of it, but I wasn't able to get a proper idea. Heck, I've been watching videos of the end's boss fight on YouTube, and I still can't really get a full comprehension of what exactly the end is saying. Though the thing is that with the end, and that brings me to my next point, where basically with the end, they made it intelligent. It's not like the bio lizard that was operating purely off instinct. No, the end is a being that is fully sentient and basically has full control over its own decisions and actions. It's not some mindless monster that's like destroy, destroy, destroy. So, but yet at the same time, they don't give any real background to the end. All they say is the end attacked the Ancients' planet, it came to Earth, and tried to attack it as well. I mean, it would be one thing if basically the end explained that it was some balancing force in the universe. It sensed that the Ancients were using the Chaos Emeralds to warp time and space, and as such, it wanted to wipe them out in order to restore the balance. Basically, that would have actually been pretty interesting, basically making it where just the end isn't inherently evil, but rather basically is just a natural part of the universe, basically, just keeping things balanced. Because think about it, if a civilization like the Ancients were left unchecked, then they could easily just overtake the entire universe and just utterly wreck things for everyone else. I mean, sure, the Ancients weren't shown to be malicious, but imagine if there was a race that had that sort of technology that was. I mean, the end would just be the perfect way to balance things out. Just destroy the evil race, and then boom, just the universe is safe. However, they didn't go in that direction, and instead, all they did was have the end talk about how it's invincible, how it's infinite, whereas all of Sonic's other enemies were finite. I mean, frankly, I feel that's a little arrogant on the end's part, saying that it's a better constructed villain than, say, Chaos, where basically speaking of which, I am a little surprised that Chaos didn't get as much of a spotlight as basically you would think, because for one thing, they mentioned in Eggman's log that just Chaos is related to the Ancients, and we see that with the Ancients themselves, basically resembling Chaos's Zero form. So basically, just revealing that Chaos is in himself an Ancient. So basically, it makes you wonder just, would every Ancient be capable of doing what Chaos was capable of doing, where basically they absorb the Chaos Emeralds and they get stronger as a result? Is that one reason why they were so determined to use them as a power source rather than just leave them lying out? Because just otherwise you could get someone like Chaos just going absolutely crazy. But anyways, back to my whole point about the end, basically. With the end, just you have that bullet hell battle, and basically you're thinking, okay, now are we going to move on to a Sonic battle? Are we going to move on to an actual fight? No, instead you get 3 button presses, and then Sonic just destroys the end. And frankly, just the battle in of itself is even less fulfilling if you aren't playing on hard mode, because from what I've seen through just looking things up, apparently, if you go into the Supreme fight on normal difficulty or easy difficulty, then what ends up happening is, instead of doing the Toho bullet hell portion that I ended up doing because I was playing the game on hard mode, you end up actually just skipping that part of the fight, and you just go on to the 3 button presses. So basically, just imagine, you're playing normal difficulty, your final boss is Supreme, just your final boss ends in 3 minutes. Where basically, like I said, sorry, I didn't say this before, but basically, when it comes to final bosses, I don't mind a relatively easy final boss, as long as the final boss feels fulfilling, where basically it feels like, okay, I'm fighting a big baddie, I'm fighting someone that definitely is worthy of the mantle, basically. Say, for example, Ganondorf from Wind Waker. Ganondorf from Wind Waker is, at least to me, not that hard a boss, where basically just all you do is really just dodge his attacks, wait for Zelda to blast him, and then just go to town on him. Heck, the hardest part of the fight is when you have to bounce the light arrow off of your mirror shield and basically hit Ganondorf with that. But even then, Ganondorf in that game was relatively easy, but even then, it still felt like a fulfilling final boss, because it felt like we were fighting the big baddie. It felt like we were fighting something that was worth fighting, basically. And not to mention, And not to mention, just they really made it where the battle felt like its own thing. We're basically just having it where it's just you and Ganondorf, and also Zelda. The rain, the water's falling in the background. The music is basically is pumping up. And then before the fight, you had Ganondorf with that laugh, basically that laugh of a man who basically he's just given up at this point. He's just gonna go crazy and basically just take you down in his last moments. But yet with the end, we didn't get that. All we got with the end was just the Supreme fight, which felt very similar to Giganto's fight, though with slightly less going on. I mean, sure, we got to have it where Supreme was flying with those laser wings, which was cool, but it didn't really change much in the fight. It wasn't like where Giganto has lasers and it was an element of dodging to an extent where you couldn't just dash around the arena as freely. And sure, well, Supreme had those turrets that were firing at you. Oh my gosh, I just realized Supreme was basically was a foreshadowing for the bullet hell section. But basically, as I was saying, okay, where was I in my train of thought? Okay, talk about Supreme, talk about yes. Talking about Supreme and basically just the bullet hell section, where basically Supreme felt really on par with the other bosses, which basically for a final boss, in my personal opinion, isn't a good thing, because basically if the final boss is on par with your standard bosses, then really, can you really call it a final boss? Where basically, heck, even TAC Guardians of Gross did this a little better in my personal opinion, where basically where TAC Guardians of Gross had a very similar concept where you were fighting for giant creatures, each with their own unique abilities. However, in TAC Guardians of Gross, they basically made it where Stink Colossus, the final boss of the game, really did stand out from the others. For one thing, they made it where Stink Colossus was on a whole different level. For one thing, just at the start of the game, right when TAC accidentally releases the Big G's, Stink Colossus sends one of his mini-bosses after you, and you have to basically fight it in a blasting minigame. So basically, here you are, you're blasting this thing constantly, and it's just this little enemy, but yet, it takes a whole bunch of hits to defeat, and then you don't see that mini-boss again until you finally get to Stink Colossus, basically. You have that build-up. You basically have Stink Colossus in the back of your mind. Stink Colossus was the final big G you saw when they were being summoned, and then so basically, like I said, you have Stink Colossus in the back of your mind. And then when you finally get to Stink Colossus, he's not like the other Titans where TAC casually jumps on his back or basically launches himself up there. No, TAC is fighting some woodies in an arena, and then Stink Colossus basically emerges from the background. He's just rising up, and then he sweeps the arena up. He sweeps the arena that you were in and basically sweeps you into his cloud, into his spark cloud. So basically, it's not so much TAC's going there on his own terms. While TAC was trying to find Stink Colossus brought TAC to him, basically, establishing a sense of dominance. And then the fact that basically Stink Colossus, unlike the other three Big G's, actually had 3 dedicated mini-boss fights that he had to do on him. And then you had the final boss in of itself, where basically they had it where they took his mini-boss, the theme used for the mini-bosses, and then they cranked it up to it. Then they made it more epic as you were just running around him, just sending his projectiles back. But anyways, that's how you do basically a boss like that, where you're like, oh, hey, it's very similar. But yet at the same time, they're making one of them distinct. Likewise with Shadows of the Colossus, when basically you're fighting the final Titan. I forget his name exactly. I think Taurus is his name, though I may be wrong. But basically, I'm just going to call him Taurus for the time being. Basically with Taurus, for one thing, they make it where he is substantially bigger than the other Titan, the other Colossi, where basically he dwarfs them. Just even the largest ones you fought in the game, he just dwarfs them as he fires these energy blasts from his hands. And he's just sitting there. He's not being aggressive, he's not being active, he's just sitting there, and it's solemn, the music is playing, and it makes you think, am I doing the right thing, basically? it's playing with your mind, unlike the other Colossi, where the music had this epic battle tense atmosphere to it, where basically it was like, okay, I am fighting a creature, I have to win. Though with Taurus's theme, it felt like it is winning the right thing. And meanwhile, just once you get on Taurus, he's just not really fighting you. He's not resisting. He's just meekly trying to swat you away. Basically, as if he's more scared of you than you are of him, basically. He sees you as an actual monster, essentially. But meanwhile, Supreme didn't give off that vibes. It felt like I was just fighting another Titan. But anyways, while the ending in of itself was was a bit disappointing, I do have to say that basically Sage Sage and Eggman did a lot to basically compensate for it, because basically just having Sage and her sacrifice, just Sage doing a Shadow the Hedgehog, basically, I do have to admit that I was basically I was a bit sad with that, basically seeing just Sage sacrifice herself. Though I kind of figured they were going to pull a Shadow the Hedgehog with her, because basically, I mean, you don't introduce a character like that just to sacrifice her. I mean, if they couldn't end Shadow off permanently with him being an organic being that fell into the atmosphere while saying, I hope this is what you want. I hope I made you proud, Maria, or something like that, basically. Just, if they couldn't end Shadow off, basically, if they couldn't kill Shadow off after that sort of moment, then basically what hope did Sage, a program that was already garnering fan favor when the game was first announced, basically, what chance did she have of being just a one-off character? But still, I'm not disappointed, because basically, unlike Shadow, where basically he's an organic being, and as such, just him coming back from that sort of thing just felt kind of forced. With Sage, she's a computer program, so naturally Eggman could have a backup of her and basically just bring her back that way. And not to mention, Sage spent a lot of time in cyberspace, so naturally just her memories were part of it as well, much like how Sonic's memories were brought into the area. So anyways, while on the topic of Sage, I do have to say that basically she was a very good addition to the cast, basically, where unlike Eggman and Orbot and Cubot, who basically are more or less just comedic relief a good chunk of the time, Sage was a very good balance to that, where basically while she did have some moments that basically that got chuckle at me, such as basically it being implied in the Eggman journal that she basically does crack jokes about Sonic and just his incompetence, and then just Sage in that one cutscene, and then the robot hit him again, basically just moments like that, though, just really built onto Eggman's relationship with Sage, and basically, and you know, it's kind of funny how Eggman and Sage's relationship, at least to me, feels kind of like the opposite of Bowser and Bowser Jr.'s. I'm not saying basically of how Bowser's an opposite father to his son as Eggman. I mean basically where Bowser and Eggman are pretty much similar when it comes to their children. The only difference is that basically with Bowser Jr. at times, I kind of feel like with Bowser Jr., he does kind of steal a bit of the spotlight away from from Bowser, whereas with Sage, it feels like she enhances Eggman, possibly because Sage is a foil to Eggman, whereas Eggman, he's very emotional, he's very impulsive, and very dynamic. Sage, on the other hand, she's calm, she's calculating, and very level-headed, basically. So I can imagine just if Sage does come back, I could imagine her basically being the straight woman to Eggman's zaniness, basically, just serving as some good contrast. Because while Orbot played that role beforehand, it still felt like Orbot was more or less comedic relief, especially with Cubot, where basically when Cubot, Orbot, and Eggman were all together, it felt like an episode of the Three Stooges, which is good, mind you, but Sage is definitely a breath of fresh air, though I do have to say that I am a little disappointed that we didn't get a little bit more of Eggman in the game. I mean, it was good that we got him in the cutscenes where we did, but it still felt like something was a bit missing. that there was something missing, what with Eggman not being as present as he has been in previous 3D Sonic games. I mean, we're basically here you had it in Adventures where Eggman was appearing in pretty much everyone's story. Yeah, Eggman actually is the only character to appear in everyone's story in Sonic Adventure. And then not to mention just Eggman's major role in Sonic Adventures 2, Sonic Heroes, and so on and so forth. But anyways, just I think that's enough of me talking about the characters. Never mind. I still have some more to talk about. I really like what this game did with Knuckles. I have to say that basically, while Tails and Amy were pretty much standard Tails and Amy, which is to say good. I have to say that Knuckles definitely stood out because unlike Sonic Boom, that basically just made Knuckles brain dead and essentially replaced his brain with a potato battery, in this game, it felt like they really tried to go to deepen Knuckles' character. What with him contemplating his place as the last echidna, him drawing all the comparisons to Angel Island, Knuckles actually stepping out to absorb an attack that was aimed at Sonic. Basically, they really did a great job with Knuckles and just expanding him from just me punch, that sort of thing. Sure, Sonic Adventures had some good Knuckles moments, but for the most part, in Sonic Adventures 2, Knuckles was more or less, I have to find the Master Emerald. That was pretty much his character, but in this game, he felt a little bit more varied, and it definitely was refreshing to see, But anyways, I think that's enough for characters. As for the gameplay, while the world basically, the thing is that with Sonic Frontiers, one thing that stuck out to me was just how most of the islands, a lot of the space that you basically were in was empty. Now, in a lot of other games, I would basically be complaining about that. I'd be like, why is there so much empty space here? But in Sonic's case, this actually plays in his favor. Because basically, by making a lot of the areas empty and wide open, it makes it where you can actually take full advantage of Sonic's speed. You see, unlike in other 3D Sonic games where you feel like you're being punished a bit for running as fast as you can with Sonic, take Sonic Adventures 1, basically. Sonic stages in that game, while they were fun, they were varied, I can never enjoy them to their full extent because you can never really run full speed in them because in those stages they're littered with areas where you have to do precise platforming, or you basically run the risk of running off a ledge, or more commonly you run the risk of running into some spikes or another obstacle, which basically makes you lose your rings and you feel a little punished for running quickly. So often or not, you're basically just running mid-speed and just occasionally being allowed to let loose with your running. So anyways, but in this game, it felt really good to run as Sonic. And frankly, this was the first time I was playing as Sonic where I felt like I could truly be the Blue Blur, where I was truly the fastest thing alive, because just dashing through the islands with 400 rings, it was so much fun. Especially when you basically do a boost jump and you launch yourself into the air, or when you're running up the wall of a mid-slant mountain. It just felt so empowering. And not to mention, just Sonic's dash in this game, it did a great job of speeding you up. But at the same time, I found that it didn't really cause any sacrifice to your turning, where basically I felt like I could still turn Sonic reasonably well, and I had a good chunk of control. The only thing was that if you were trying to do a ring challenge where you're trying to get all the rings on the ground, it could be a little bit irritating because you could easily just zip right past them, or on the final island when you're doing one of the dropping orb challenges, basically, you see where the orb is and you want to get to it, but then you do a dash and you just run right past it, you just overshoot it. But anyways, and this actually extended into the levels, where basically just in the levels, I never really felt like Sonic's speed was a hindrance to me. Sure, there was the occasional stage where you couldn't really run all that fast, but that was more or less because of how the stage was structured. What with having to basically utilize those sling cannons, or having to basically use the pull wires, things like that. But anyways, though the thing with the levels though is that, and this is the big fault that I have with the levels, is that you only have 4 overall level designs. You have the Green Hills Zone, you have the Toxic Flood Plant from Sonic Adventure from Sonic 2, you also have just Emerald Island, Angel Island from Sonic 3, and random generic city that I think is supposed to be Station Square or the Escape from the City level from Sonic Adventures 2. But anyways, but still, just I was a little disappointed where basically it was supposedly going off of Sonic's memories, but apparently Sonic can only remember 4 different areas. Basically, I mean, if they would have thrown a little bit more variety, that would have made it perfect. Basically, just heck, throw in a casino level. I mean, that would have been really cool. Especially with how some of the missions one of the missions present in every level was get X amount of rings. They could have made it where, oh, hey, collect 999 rings on the casino level. I mean, sure, that could have had moments of irritation, but still, it would have been a cool change of pace, especially since they make it where you have a 999 ring limit. And, though, the thing is that in the game's defense, though, basically, all of the levels are most of the levels are optional. Sure, the first 2 levels aren't, because basically it's all part of the tutorial. But once you get past the tutorial section, you're free to do what you want on the first island, and basically the second island, the third island, and basically whatever. Basically, levels become 100% optional, where basically, if you find yourself struggling to get keys, for instance, you can go down to Big's fishing spot, and you can basically just you can basically use the coins that you get either lying around the field or from the shooting star event, which by the way, just if you want to just get a lot of purple coins, get a lot of big coins, just wait for the shooting star event and just collect as many meteor shooting stars as you can, and then basically just wait for the roulette to give you a boatload of big coins. But anyways, but basically from the keys, the gears, to basically even the memory medals that you find all scattered around the level, basically the memory tokens that you need to unlock the different character dialogues, just all of them are optional because you can buy them from Big, and they're not all that expensive, where it's not like, oh, I have to spend 30 coins just to get one medal. No, basically a medal is 5 coins, and you can get them for free if you get the big fishing tickets. Basically, those gold fishing tickets that you find in the chests. But anyways, and then that brings me to Big, where basically Big was a highlight of the game for me, because just the fact that they have random Big is in the cyber world for no explained reason. Just heck, in the game, when Sonic first sees Big, he's like, how did you even get here? And Big's like, I don't know, I just found myself here. But I don't know if it's just me, but basically I got some massive Crypto Island vibes off of Big, where basically, think about it. Big has his own currency that exists in a cyber world, and not to mention just Big, he's on an island, and basically, and you're catching things out of the water, which could potentially be NFTs. Basically, Big is basically the king of crypto in Sonic. Frankly, I was half expecting just to find it where your big final boss is against Big. Yeah, any coincidence that there are 2 fishing spots on the final island? I think not. The dimensional barrier weakened, and Big was able to expand his reach. Heck, now that I think about it, the end is purple. It's Big Purple. So basically, the end could be working for Big. We don't know. Basically, make you go into the cyber world so you can live on Big's Crypto Island. Yeah, Big turns you into an NFT. Yeah, that's what happened to Froggy. Big turned him into an NFT. But anyways, another thing I liked about the fishing spot was the music, as well as the whole fishing mechanic. In fact, it just felt relatively addicting because you would basically put in the coin, and then you just have to do a simple button press with generous timing, and boom, you get a fish or a treasure chest or a piece of trash that gives you a boatload of coins. And basically, and the beautiful part and the best part is that it multiplies with each area, where basically you go to the fishing spot on the first island, and basically everything is at a times one multiplier, where basically you're not really getting more than 6 coins for a single item. Oh, hey, Chitanda. I'm doing pretty well today. You? Anyways, as stated by the title, I'm basically just stating my thoughts on Sonic Frontiers. Which basically, Sonic Frontiers, as I've stated before, it's actually one of my favorite Sonic games, basically, that's been released in quite a while, basically, just where ever since Sonic Generations, but even then with Sonic Generations, while it's a good game gameplay wise, it just felt like something was missing from that game. Just because it felt like it was just borrowing a little too much from the past Sonic games and was just trying to ride off their coattails. Meanwhile, Sonic Frontiers, it did its own thing and it did it very well, at least until the end, where there was great build up, where we get these 3 Titans that basically where you're fighting them as Super Sonic, you're going Goku on them. Heck, basically, with Knight, you're taking his sword and you're cleaving him in twain, all while epic rock music plays in the background. But then we get to the end, and the final boss is just bullet hell. You're not even fighting this thing as Sonic. You're fighting it as basically just some Toho bullet hell with Sage piloting the final Titan, which, granted, it was cool seeing Sage and Sonic team up, but basically, just you would think that they would go above and beyond with how they made it, where just the level that they were doing with the 3 bosses before, because just each one of them felt like a final boss in their own right, you know? Yeah, exactly. And the thing is that what's really a kick in the teeth is that the whole Toho bullet hell fight stage of the fight, that's only available if you play the game on hard mode. Basically, because basically after I defeated the end, I was curious to see how well other people did with it. So I looked it up on YouTube, and I was a little confused when I saw basically the person doing it. They fought Supreme, they defeated Supreme, and then just it instantly cut to the part of the fight where you're just pressing the Y button 3 times with Sonic, so that way he can dash through the end. But yeah, so basically and Supreme in of itself definitely does give off first phase vibes, where Supreme actually feels a little easier to fight than the other 3 Titans, because basically with the other 3 Titans, they all had their own unique hook to them, basically, where with Giganto, there really wasn't a hook to him because he was the very first boss, your first introduction to Super Sonic. You're not all that familiar with the controls. I mean, the most you know how to really do is, homing attack. Maybe do a parry if you were paying attention to the loading screen tutorials. But then you had Wyvern, where you had to chase him, you had to parry the missiles in order to not get knocked back so much, and then basically parry his claws so that way you could go in for the kill. And then basically you had it with Knight, where you basically had to take control of the shield and just trying to bash it into him, and then the final half of the fight, you're just parrying the shield back. Meanwhile, with Supreme, it was nothing like that. It was just more or less attack Supreme, destroy the little objects near his head, you win. But anyways, back to what I was saying I was talking about the gameplay earlier. But anyways, okay, I was talking about how, yeah. But anyways, I was talking about this earlier, but basically, I don't know if it's just me, but basically, Big was a highlight of the game for me. Not because basically I'm a big fan of Big, but because basically, for one thing, Big was just completely out of the blue, just no hint that Big was going to be in the game. Just all of a sudden, Big is in the fishing zone. But more so, the fact that Big gives off some major crypto vibes. Basically, Big was kind of reminding me a bit of a crypto bro, where think about it. Big has his own currency that basically can only be used in the cyber world. Basically, its value fluctuates is very volatile. It's not like this fixed value. It varies depending on the world you're in, where sometimes just the coins are worth more, where sometimes fish and other items are worth more coins than just in other worlds. Just later on in the game, the more the coins are worth. And then basically the fact that just a lot of the items that you're fishing out kind of feel like a bit NFT-ish, you know, where basically you feel like Big could be posting them as NFTs. Heck, maybe that's what happened to Froggy. Big turned Froggy into an NFT. Okay, Froggy, I'm sacrificing you to the NFTs. I'm gonna turn Froggy into an NFT. Heck, maybe that's why. Maybe the end was a minion of Big. Think about it, the end was Big Purple. And basically, and notice how in the final world, there were 2 big fishing spots. And that was happening after the dimension was weakening. For all we know, Big was trying to basically spread his crypto scheme into the greater world. Basically, Big's fishing spot could technically be Crypto Island. Yeah, basically, screw that big coin. We got Big the Cat. Yeah, frankly, just now I wouldn't be surprised if we see Sega they release one NFT and it's a Big or Froggy. NFT Froggy. Yeah, exactly. I really love the big fishing in the game because it felt like basically unlike the fishing in Sonic Adventure where it was slow and tedious and basically was designed purely to sell the Sega Pro fishing game, in this game it felt like its own thing and it felt very snappy basically. Where you could just throw your lure anywhere and you would get a fish no matter what. Just the only way you'd miss out on a fish is if you missed an action command. Though basically, no matter what, you were always going to get your base money back. Where basically you're always going to get at least 1 coin back in the first world, always get basically 2 back in the second, and so on and so forth. Basically, you were never at a net loss. And when it came to the big coins, as I call them, basically we have Bitcoin, then we have Big Coin. Yeah, Big's version of Doge. But anyways, the fact that you can get so much big coin from basically from the Blood Moon, I don't know what better way to describe it as. Basically, it's essentially the Blood Moon where all the Guardians come back, and then you have the shooting stars coming down, and you got the roulette wheel. I was able to get around basically 200, 300 just from one of those events because I got lucky with the slots. Yeah, and basically, the best part about the fishing games was that they were the ultimate source of freedom in this game because basically it meant that you didn't have to go around and collect all of those medals / wrenches / hearts. Which basically, on the first island, it wasn't so bad getting all of Amy's memory stones because they were being given out like candy there. But then once you started to get to Knuckles level and also Knuckles Island as well as Chaos Island. Don't even get me started on Chaos Island, basically. Chaos Island was arguably my least favorite area in the game, just because of the fact that the game did not make it clear of where the rails to get to the Blue Emerald Island and the red and how to get to the Red Emerald Island, because basically it was the first area where you couldn't just grab the blue, red, yellow, and silver emeralds basically on your own. You had to actually interact with Tails events. So basically, here I am going mad, looking around, trying to find how to get to the Red Emerald, and then basically it's like, I look up online, and it's like, oh, you have to talk to Tails. Same with that bridge on Chaos Island, because you run up that bridge of Sonic, you could easily reach the other side, but then you get invisible walled. Yeah, basically. And the best part is that you don't die if you lose a fish. Yeah, exactly. All you do is you lose some coins. But even then, it was a very relaxing experience. And not to mention, I really love the music in the fishing area. It's very relaxing, very calming, basically. And not to mention, it's a bit of an earworm, really. Though it's even funnier about the fishing minigame is that it also has a bit of dark web vibes to it, because the fact that you can buy Cocos from Big, and basically it's one thing if Big's selling the seeds and the seeds of power and defense, basically if he's selling those, like, okay, these are things that you could just naturally find around the world. Meanwhile, Big is selling the souls of the dead. Big is selling people on the dark web for 3 coins, basically. And what's even insane, and it's even crazier considering that a tire at its base level is worth 6 coins. So basically basically, for a tire or a twig, basically, they are the value of 20 people in Big's mind. In Big's Twisted Island, you can buy 20 people for a stick. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I wouldn't put it past Big. Basically, what with basically Big being able to basically, that actually reminds me a bit of something where basically just when I was first playing Sonic Heroes, just this is the first time I had ever seen Big because it was my first ever Sonic game. So basically, I thought when I was playing as Team Rose for the first time, I thought that the fur around Big's mouth was basically one of those face scarves that you sometimes see terrorists wear. So basically, I thought that Big was some sort of terrorist when I first was playing Sonic Heroes, basically, because just it was around that time when things were a little tense in that regard. And then basically just they have it where Big's able to fly, where basically Big's just flying with where basically Big was able to fly the Tornado 2 without any prior indication that he could fly planes. So basically I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh." I'm thinking, what is Sega trying to tell us with this game? But anyways, different topic, away from Big, basically from basically Big being in that area. But anyways, one thing I liked about the challenges, though, basically, I love the challenges in basically this game because they felt a lot like the shrines from. They felt like a combination of the shrines and the towers from Breath of the Wild, and that basically they were these objectives that you were trying to reach, and that they would make you stronger with each one that you complete. However, with each one that you complete, you also fill out a little more of the map, which basically, it was really addicting in regards to just the challenges, because basically, for one thing, they were a great source of seeds that could boost up your power and your defense, but also just they gave you more of the map, and not to mention they were pretty easy to complete. Just heck, some of them were just, oh, hey, just land Sonic on the squares when you do your sidestep, or basically, or oh, do this much damage to this totem, or basically, or just reach this point over here. Which was great because basically just you unlock the map, you get to see more of the world, and then the big piece of resistance, you basically, when basically you get all the challenge markers complete, you have it where just you can fast travel to all of the different level points, making it where just it's easier to interact with all of the optional character, where it's easier to interact with all of the optional character dialogues. And not to mention, just they had some pretty good ones. I mean, basically with Tails and Amy, it was basically just standard Tails and Amy, which isn't to say that it's bad, but basically it was just, if you know how Tails and Amy are in Sonic games, just that's pretty much what you were getting. But I really have to say that I like the moment that Sonic had with Knuckles, where they were surprisingly contemplative, where basically, unlike Knuckles, who's basically more of a brash, basically punch first, think later sort of guy. Heck, the guy who got easily tricked by Eggman in Sonic Adventures to assault Sonic and Tails. Basically, just we went from that to basically Knuckles discussing just how he does feel saddened by the fact that he's the last Echidna, and that basically that's one reason why he feels so bound to guard the Master Emerald, and why he doesn't really step away from it very often. Yeah. And yeah, just Knuckles was great, but also Sage was also really great as well, basically, because with Sage, granted, she did start off a little lackluster, what with basically her main thing being, leave now, leave now. But the thing is that basically, as we got to see more and more of her, we got to see her interact with Eggman, basically, just she really started to grow on me, you know? Especially with, like I said, with her with the father-daughter relationship that she had with Eggman. Because basically, just half the time when Sage would talk with Eggman, I was kind of expecting her to ask him to take her to McDonald's, or Burger King, or better yet, Sonic. I could easily imagine Eggman and Sage going to Sonic and basically just enjoying their snacks, their milkshakes in Eggman's hover car. Basically, I could just imagine basically Eggman ranting about Sonic and just Sage, Father, I bet I know one thing about Sonic that I know one Sonic you would like. And then Eggman, ha! I doubt you could find any aspect of any Sonic that I would like. And then basically, and then Sage makes Eggman take her to Sonic. You were saying, Father, just drink your milkshake. But frankly, just one thing I like to think is that Sage, she went through all this effort to protect Eggman because she wanted a Happy Meal. And that was the only way she could get the Happy Meal. Better yet, basically, Sage, she wanted to go to Burger King so she could get the Burger King crown. But for her sacrifice, Sage deserves 1,000 Burger King crowns. The one thing I found funny was just how was basically in this one cutscene where basically just it was one of Eggman and Sage's conversations in cyberspace where basically Sage, she just started things off in the cutscene with, and then the robot hit Sonic again. Basically, just I could imagine Eggman telling her to tell him that story about 50 times over, just because he just loves the prospect of Sonic getting hit in the face. Yeah, they have fan arts of Eggman and Sage going to McDonald's. Yeah, I actually did look it up after I played the game out of curiosity, basically, just to see Eggman, Sage, father, daughter art. And sure enough, I found the McDonald's one, and I was laughing my ass off, especially with this one comic where it showed just Sage devouring this Happy Meal as if basically she hadn't eaten in days. But then another cutscene that really just struck a chord was basically when we get that Father Dear song, where basically just Sage is thinking of her relationship with Eggman, and then but the thing that kind of killed that moment a little, or at the very least dampened it a bit, was the fact that they started it off with basically bits of Eggman angrily ranting, basically. When Sage thinks of Eggman, she just thinks of angry ranting, basically. She's thinking of her hockey dad. I could easily imagine Eggman being a hockey dad, where basically I could imagine Sage being a part of the next Mario and Sonic Olympics game, and basically Eggman's in the stand rooting for Sage. She gets less than a perfect score, and then basically he just throws a fit. That's rigged! You are rigging this against my daughter! She deserves perfect tens! She stuck the landing perfectly! And then Sage, Father, please, you are embarrassing me. No, Sage, no, I'm not gonna stand down! You got a perfect score, you get the gold! And then Sage is she's just face palming while Eggman is getting into a fight with the judges, basically. Eggman gets a red card, basically, yeah, Sage is in the soccer game, basically. She gets a foul called against her. Eggman basically, out of curiosity, have you ever seen this one episode of Team Aqua Hunger Force where Carl becomes a big brother, joins the Big Brother program because Frylock's little brother had a hot mom, basically, to him. So basically, Carl goes to the kids' soccer game, and basically Carl, he's getting aggressive. Oh, come on, you're not playing the game properly. And then basically the ref gives Carl, basically Frylock is like, sit down, Carl, sit down. And Carl's like, okay. And then Carl just picks up the chair and throws it onto the field. And then basically Carl gets a red card from the ref. He's like, oh, you're giving me a Valentine's Day card? Well, I love you too! And then Carl hits him with a baseball bat. I can imagine Eggman doing something very similar, basically, at one of Sage's sporting events. And basically, meanwhile, just Sage, she doesn't know whether to be embarrassed or proud of her father, basically. Because basically I could imagine Eggman being a relatively active father, especially since it was confirmed in basically his memos that he basically didn't really have much of a family life of his own, considering that just his entire family revolved around Maria, basically. We're to the point where basically Gerald, Maria dies. Just Gerald not only makes his password her name, but then he's like, I'm going to destroy the world, but Ivo's on the planet! Screw you, Ivo! You may be my grandson, but you are crap! Yeah, exactly. Yeah, basically, it's one of the shorts. I think it's called Big Brother, basically. But yeah, it is a decent one. It ends with Carl trying to fake his death to get out of a relationship with the mom after basically a one night stand gone wrong, and basically Carl wasn't wearing protection, which resulted in him giving his little brother a little brother or sister. But anyways, but as I was saying, basically, just it the game did have a lot of good moments, and just I really loved running around the world. Basically, just it felt so cathartic to just run around the world, especially when you had full rings. And basically, just because the thing is that while the world is mostly empty, it actually plays in the game's favor quite greatly because basically it lets you really go as fast as you can as Sonic. It lets you be the fastest thing alive. Not to mention, just Sonic Frontiers has some of the best steering that I've dealt with in a Sonic game. Where in Sonic Adventures 1 and 2, while the overall controls are pretty solid, one complaint I do have about Sonic and Slash Shadow is basically when you're running, basically just you turn so quickly, and just it feels like you're turning, and then all of a sudden just you're running, boom, you take a 90-degree turn, and then basically you feel like you're jettisoning away and you're moving a little faster than the camera. But in this game, it feels like the camera does a really good job of keeping up with Sonic, especially even when you're doing high speed mode. And I heard that in adventure mode, it's even better because just you're not moving quite as fast, and basically it's more used for precise platforming. Which, speaking of which, my personal favorite portion of the game was the fourth island with the towers, because just they had the music, they had the build up as you go up the towers. Sonic is getting slowly corrupted more and more with each one you shut down. And then basically you get to see those bits of exposition with the ancients. So basically just so much build up, all for an ending that basically was Toho Bullet Hell. Yeah, but anyways, but just when it came to the levels, though, while the levels had great control in their own right, the thing is that I wasn't fond of the whole idea that we had only 4 different level environments, where we had Green Hills in the first Sonic game, the Toxic Plant Zone from the second game, the Emerald Island area from the third, and then generic Cityscape, which I think may be just a combination of Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2, basically. But just a little more level variety would have been nice. I mean, just maybe throw in a desert level, an ice level, a casino level. A casino level would have been really cool, considering that basically they give you a 999 ring limit to play with. But anyways, just overall, but considering that the levels were for the most part optional, I can easily let that slide. Especially since just your keys don't carry over between worlds. I mean, just all you have to do is get enough keys to get all of the Chaos Emeralds and to get the Silver Chaos Emerald, and then boom, you're golden. You don't have to do a single level more. So basically, yeah, and you can buy keys from Big. So basically, you don't even have to really step in a level, to be honest. All you have to really do is find a fishing spot, go mad, boom, you got keys. And then just buying your 20 people from Big for only 3 coins. Basically, one thing that's funny is that on the final island, basically, unlike the other islands where Big actually has a fixed amount of Cocos you can buy, on the final island, you can actually buy an unlimited amount of Cocos. So basically, that actually happened to me, where basically I was playing through the final island, I was doing the fishing mini game. I'm like, okay, I have leftover coin, I have plenty of coins to burn. I might as well just do some fishing, and then I'm going to buy some Cocos. I'll buy all the Cocos that I can buy. So basically, I'm just buying Cocos over and over again. I'm thinking, when are we going to run out? And I'm realizing, wait, we're not running out. And basically, it got to the point where when I went back to the Elder Coco and I turned in the Cocos, basically, it just wouldn't stop giving me bonuses. Basically, let me put you this, to put things into perspective. I went into that area with about a level 66 speed and a level 1 ring. Basically, just base level 1 rings. So basically, after I finished talking to the Coco Elder, I actually came out of it with max speed and a level 75 rings. And mind you, that was only because I stopped buying Cocos. I could have went really crazy with the Cocos, and I could have just bought so many Cocos that I could have maxed both of those things out. Especially since you have it where just the price for an upgrade with Cocos doesn't increase. It's not like with the seeds where basically it becomes more and more with each passing upgrade. And speaking of which, just funny thing is that how on the first island, on Kronos Island, you have it where there are plenty of areas where you can actually easily grind for experience. Where basically, one area that I know that was really good was this one spring that was right near Eggman's ship. You would go to this one spring, you would bounce off it, and then just do a bunch of tricks, and then you'd get around about 130, 150 experience. And just, you could rack up so much experience in such a short time that you could pretty much, where if you wanted to, you could have it where you have every upgrade with Sonic before you even before you even get to the first boss fight. Yeah, that pinball minigame in World 3 was annoying. Frankly, I actually didn't find that minigame to be too bad, because the key to winning that minigame is actually trying to get your ball into basically the side into the side pockets, so that way they go down to the flippers, because when you do that, it causes a seed to appear, which when you collect the seed, it multiplies your score, basically. Just multiplies it times 2, then by 4, 8, 16, and so on and so forth, until basically you're just zipping right through the score portion. Yeah, but basically just, I also like the little callbacks that they would have, where basically just Sonic referencing the Mystic Falls. I also like the reference to the Black Arms and the Ark, and just, they really did a great job of just tying in past Sonic games, where it felt like it wasn't trying to be this game wasn't trying to be a one-off thing, where it's not like, oh hey, this is the definitive Sonic game. It's not like, oh hey, we're gonna maybe throw in an Easter egg if you're lucky. No, basically just, they were pretty much keeping it by the established lore, and it felt like it was building off the world, which was really nice. It felt like, oh hey, I actually played a bunch of Sonic games in the past. I feel rewarded for knowing this knowledge, of knowing about the Black Arms, of knowing about Chaos, basically, because just playing Sonic Adventures it gives you because basically Sonic Frontiers does give you a greater appreciation for Sonic Adventures as a whole, because basically, what with Chaos being the last Ancient, and basically him going crazy with the Chaos Emeralds, though this does kind of confuse me in regards to the fact that Chaos is a mutated Chao. But then again, it could be a thing of where the Chaos where they did say a few of the Ancients went by. So basically, Chaos, just due to his close proximity to the Chaos Emeralds, it could have allowed him to maintain his ancient form, whereas basically the other ancients evolved into the Chao, or the Chaos are basically another form of the ancients, much like the Coco, But anyways, just, as much as I hate to end it off here, I think that now would be a good time to end things off. It was great seeing you, Chitanda, and I'll see you later. So with that, I'll see you later. Bye.